Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Darkest Hour. I'm your host, Amanda Jane. There's something about the woods. Vast, quiet, ancient. It feels a little too alive. Some who enter catch a glimpse of something massive moving just out of sight. Others swear that the forest itself turns against them. Whatever it is, doesn't want to be found, but it never stops watching, making itself known. Tonight, we're headed deep into the woods, where every trail leads to a different kind of fear. So, let's get started, shall we? There's a trail system near where I grew up in western North Carolina. I won't name it, it's not famous or anything, but it's maintained with a few campgrounds and signs here and there to make it look more official than it really is. Back in the late 90s, when I was around 19 or 20, I used to hike out there a lot. Not for exercise or any spiritual reason, I just didn't have anything better to do. The trail was only about 20 minutes from the house, and I liked how quiet it was. I never really ran into people out there unless it was peak season, and even then, the ones you passed didn't usually say much. I hadn't been out that way in years until this past fall. I went back home to help out my folks. I had a day to myself, and I figured I'd take a drive, see if the place had changed. It had, but not in the way I expected. The trees were the same mostly, that thick, low-branch kind of forest that feels like it's leaning in towards you. But the trail markers were newer, bright orange instead of the old faded blue. The dirt path looked wider than I remembered too, almost groomed, like someone had really taken over upkeep. I parked in the same gravel lot that I used to and started walking. It took me about 10 minutes before I realized I hadn't passed the old wooden mile marker that I remembered, the one with the cracked map and faded plastic sleeve. I figured maybe they'd taken it down, but a few minutes later, I saw something even more confusing, a fork in the path. I stopped because I knew that had never been there before. This trail was just one big loop, one way in, same way out. But here it was, plain as day, 2 dirt paths, splitting around a massive pine. The left side was more worn, familiar. The right, not so much. The right one looked fresh, not muddy, not overgrown, just shallow, like no one had really walked in it yet. But it was wide enough to follow, and it curved downhill just slightly. From where I stood, it looked like it bent around a stand of birch trees, and it kept going into thicker woods. I don't know what made me take it. Maybe curiosity. Maybe the part of me that wanted to prove that I still knew these woods better than whatever new trail committee had come along since. But I stepped onto the path. Right away, I noticed silence. I mean, it had already been quiet. No cars, of course. No other hikers, but this was different. No birds. The wind had stopped. Were there even bugs? The leaves underfoot were soft, dry, but they didn't crunch. I know how that sounds, but that's what really hit me. I could feel the texture through my boots, but I couldn't hear it. The farther I walked, the more I noticed other things too. Subtle at first. Every tree looked a little bit wrong. They were healthy, full-grown trees, but the spacing was off, too evenly placed, like someone had arranged them to look natural, but didn't quite get it right. Every 10 or 12 feet, another one, same size, same lean. And then there were the figures. Not people, Not animals, just bundles of twine and wood lashed together into shapes, some hanging from branches, some nailed to trunks. I counted at least 4 in the span of 20 minutes. They weren't threatening exactly, but they weren't decorative either. No ribbons or color, just old rope and sticks. At one point, I thought I heard something behind me, twigs breaking. I was almost relieved to hear a sound, but when I turned around, the path behind me looked flatter, wider, and I realized I couldn't see the fork anymore. I kept going, mostly because I didn't want to admit that I was getting nervous, not even to myself. About 5 minutes later, I came to a clearing. Perfect circle. No leaves on the ground, just flat, dry dirt. And a large rock in the center, like a marker or altar. All around it, the same evenly spaced trees. Every single one of them had one of those twine figures nailed to it. And I don't know what the worst thing that could possibly happen in that moment is, but for me, it was that I heard my name. Not shouted, just spoken. From the other side of the clearing. It was my voice. I didn't even think. I turned and walked fast, back the way I came. Not running, but close. I kept my head down, and I didn't look behind me. The forest stayed silent, but I could feel something tracking alongside me. I couldn't see it, though. When I finally saw the split in the trail again, I almost cried. I hiked the rest of the way out in a straight line. It took me almost 2 hours. By the time I reached my car, it was dusk. Way later than it should have been. I tried to look it up later. Maps, forums, anything. No record of that fork ever existing. Not now. Not in the past. It wasn't there when I looked back, before I hiked out. It was just one path. Like it had always been. I haven't been back to that path since, but that voice, my voice, I hate that. Back in the summer of '88, I took a fire watch job out in the Blue Mountains, Washington side. I was 24 and between lives. I was the age where solitude felt like a solution. The tower, it sat 4 stories up, surrounded by forests in every direction. You'd take a service road most of the way, hike the last mile, and from that point on, you were on your own. One supply drop every Wednesday. A 2-way radio, a cot, a weather log, nothing else. At the time, it felt like exactly what I needed. And then things started getting off. It began with lights, small ones, low on the tree line, out past the western ridge. First one, then 2. Looked like someone holding a lighter out in the dark. I figured it was just a hiker ignoring closures, maybe camped too close to the fire-prone zone. I marked it on the log and moved on. But the lights came back the next night. Same time, just past 2 a.m. Same place, still flickering. And then they started showing up to the east, too. Not brighter or closer, just more of them. I called it in. The ranger on the other end said, "You're alone out there. Trust what you see." Which wasn't the comfort I think he meant it to be. The third night, the lights didn't flicker. They held. Soft, steady glow. Low off the ground. Like lanterns. But the air stayed still. No smoke or movement, just quiet, uncomfortable quiet. I turned on the radio for background noise and tried to sleep. Around 2:30, I woke up to the sound, a sound I couldn't place. It wasn't wind, it wasn't the stairs. It was a noise above me. I was laying there staring at the dark ceiling, hearing the faintest creak of weight, just one or two shifts, like someone crouched up there, adjusting slowly, not walking, but maybe waiting. I stayed still for over an hour. I never heard it leave. The next morning, I climbed up to the roof. Nothing out of place or any footprints or scratches, just condensation on the glass and a weird cold spot along the west wall. It felt like the air didn't want to move there. I told myself it was just early fall settling in. That night, the lights didn't come. But the next morning, I woke up to find the binoculars that I kept on the windowsill were gone. They turned up later outside, sitting on the railing of the east-facing platform, perfectly balanced. After that, I stopped sleeping through the night so well. I'd lay in the cot, half waiting for the sounds to start. Sometimes they didn't. Other times I'd hear the tower creak, like someone was halfway up the steps, just standing there. I made it to the end of the season. Never saw a fire, never saw another person. The ranger said I did a good job, asked if I'd come back the next year. I said no. He didn't ask why. It's been decades. I live back east now. I've got a porch, a dog, and a backyard that fades into the woods. I still really love the quiet. But it's like every time I'm woken up at 2 or 3 in the morning, I'm always a little nervous, thinking I'm going to hear somebody walking on my roof. Or worse, in my room. I've hiked the same trail system for years. It's a loop that cuts through a stretch of forest just west of the border, across a ridge, and it winds back through some ravine country. Nothing advanced, no summits, just quiet, long woods and the kind of isolation that I like when I want to keep my head clear, or clear my head. I never found anything strange out there until last October, and then I for sure did. I'd taken a few days off of work and gone out for a solo trip. It was just for 2 nights. I wasn't far from the southern ridge when I stepped off trail. I needed to take a piss. I saw something sticking out of the ground near the base of a slope. It looked like a vent, metal, rusted. It looked like the type of vent you'd see on the back of a building, except this was in the dirt, maybe 5 feet off the ground. It was set right into the hillside, half covered by leaves and brush, like it hadn't been touched in years. I walked over, cleared it off, and then I leaned down to look through it. Behind the slats was darkness, not the natural kind. And there were straight edges inside, corners. It was a room. I followed the slope around until I found a second metal structure, flat to the ground. It looked like a cellar door, sunk just barely below the roots and buried under pine needles. Someone had built it into the earth itself. The handles were old but intact, so I pulled. The whole door groaned like something was being woken up, and beneath it, a narrow set of stairs. I stood there for a long time. I don't know what I was waiting for. A smell, a sound, some reason not to go in there. Eventually, I pulled out my flashlight and started going. It was dry. That was the first surprise. Not moldy or flooded. The air had that closed-in metallic taste, but it was breathable. The stairs ended in a small concrete chamber, maybe 10 by 10 feet. The walls had been painted at some point, but were faded and marked up. There was a cot in the corner, a battery lantern, a folding table with stacked cans, and a little camper stove. There was also an old Sony Handycam. It looked like it was still on. The lens light blinked red. I didn't touch it, though. The whole shelter felt wrong. Not just old and unfinished, but whoever had made it planned to stay there a long time and didn't. I turned in a slow circle and saw marks on the far wall. Deep scratches in the paint. Not words, just tall, narrow, V-shaped carvings, all in a vertical line, 8 of them. Underneath, in a lighter scrawl, someone had drawn a door. Simple rectangle, nothing else. But the longer I stood there, the worse I felt, physically. I also felt like I was being watched, but I physically didn't feel good. But there was no second exit, no pipes, just that vent that I'd seen outside, which now let in a weak slice of light near the ceiling. And then I heard a click, soft, electronic. The camcorder had stopped blinking. I turned and climbed the stairs. I made sure not to run, mainly because my legs were jello and I didn't want to fall on my face. I just moved as quickly as I could, back into the daylight. The air felt too sharp there, like I'd stepped into altitude. I replaced the cellar door, covered it with pine needles, and left it the way I found it. Mostly. I just couldn't stop thinking about the shelter for the rest of the trip. I didn't really sleep. I kept checking over my shoulder, and I skipped the second night and hiked out early. I didn't tell anyone about it for a while. Eventually, I called the ranger station, left a vague message about saying I'd found an old bunker near the ridge, that someone should probably check it out. They never called back. A month later, I went back just to prove it to myself. The vent was still there, but the door was gone. I've always been kind of a nature freak, so one of my favorite things to do is go camping alone. It's basically my version of a spa day. I'm 35 now, and I've been going at least 4 times a year since I was 20. As a kid, my dad would take me every summer, so it's always been part of my life. In all of that time, I've only had one strange experience, but I still think about it on every trip since. It was about 5 or 6 years ago now. I was roughly halfway through the Appalachian Trail. I found a nice place to set up for the night. There was nothing special about it. I was a little off the beaten path, but not so far away that I considered it dangerous. I mostly just like to make sure no one else is going to randomly stumble upon my campsite. While I was cleaning my dishes, I kept hearing something big moving around behind me. I was worried about bears, so I kept my air horn close. I settled into my tent. A few hours later, I woke to the same sound, only much closer. I blew the air horn just to be safe, and the ground actually shook as whatever it was ran back into the woods. And I don't mean I felt its vibrations. I mean the earth moved. I've never encountered a bear big enough to make a mini earthquake. I didn't sleep much for the rest of the night. If anything, I dozed in and out of consciousness. Around dawn, I heard it return. I dropped the air horn twice while trying to use it, and when this thing got between the tent and the fire, I saw a towering silhouette, much too big to be a bear. As it got closer, it raised one arm into the air, and it looked more human than anything. I finally got the air horn to work, and this time it let out a loud roar before it ran away. I don't know what to call that sound. It was deep, but also screechy. I hate to say it, but the closest thing I can compare it to is a Wookiee. And again, the earth shook as it ran from camp. The sun was almost up, so I took that opportunity to start packing. I wanted to make it as far down the trail as possible before I had to stop again. As soon as I got out of the tent, I saw the footprints. They were fucking huge. I wear a size 12, and it dwarfed my own foot. I felt like a little kid stepping on one of those sizing rugs at the shoe store. You know, those ones with the little blue footprints. Am I the only one that liked standing on each one? Never mind, not the point. These footprints were terrifying. That's the point. It was kind of impossible not to think of Bigfoot. But Bigfoot isn't real. But look at these humongous prints. I just wanted to get far, far away. My normal goal was to hit 15 miles a day. I didn't always make it, but that day I did almost 20, which is still my personal best. That night I didn't go quite so far to set up camp. I welcomed human intruders over whatever made those footprints. I don't know. Bigfoot, something else. I'm not ashamed to admit that I was jumpy that night. You'd think that I'd be ready to pass out after the previous night and a day of intense hiking, but every little sound had me back on full alert, even the ones I could easily identify. Then the thwacking started just after midnight. It sounded like someone was hitting a tree with a big stick. It wasn't close by, but it couldn't have been that far away, if I could hear it as well as I did. I couldn't imagine why anyone would be beating a tree, let alone so late at night. Something about it was so unnerving. It went on for nearly 20 minutes before it finally stopped. The next day I ran into some people on the trail, and we ended up eating lunch together. I asked if they heard the noises from the night before, but didn't mention my other experience. I didn't want to sound like a lunatic. They hadn't heard a thing, but they did tell me that Bigfoot were known for wood knocking to mark their territory. I'd never heard that before, but it felt like an awfully crazy coincidence, considering what I'd heard, what I'd been through. I made about 15 miles that day. I didn't have any more problems, but I couldn't stop thinking about Bigfoot. So I did some research once I made it back to the safety of my own home. Apparently, wood knocking is totally a thing. They do it to warn others away from their territory, but also to communicate. At least that's what I read. There's so much stuff out there about Bigfoot, Sasquatch. I never thought I'd actually be a believer, but I'm fairly certain that I had a genuine encounter out there. I wouldn't mind doing the trail again one day, but I've mostly stuck closer to home since then. I'm a field biologist, mostly focusing on mid-sized mammal migration patterns across the upper Midwest and interior forests. I've spent the last 20 years of my life tracking movement, collaring wildlife, reviewing trail cam footage. I've published, I've lectured. I know what behavior looks like. And this wasn't behavior. It started last spring when a tagged bobcat female, about 3 years old, began returning to the same location. That's not unusual on its own. Denning spots, food access, all of that. But she was returning too quickly. I'd fitted her with a GPS collar 2 months earlier. She moved like normal for a while. And then she started circling back to this one spot, just east of the boundary line. Dense pine, rocky soil, some kind of natural depression in the terrain. At first I figured it was a den, but the data showed that she wasn't sleeping there. She'd stop for about 10 minutes and then leave. Same path, same exact pause and movement. And it wasn't just her. Within 2 weeks, a second animal, tagged fox, did the same thing. Different approach angle, but same stop, same window of time. Then a black bear. then another bobcat. All tagged, all collared by my team, all stopping at the exact same coordinates. I checked the site myself, and there was nothing there. No visible den, no carcass, no scat, no mineral lick. Just pine needles and rock. Not even a strong scent marker. But the clearing had a weird quality to it. Perfectly circular. Almost too clean, like it had been scrubbed by rain that hadn't fallen anywhere else. I stood there longer than I meant to. I didn't hear a single bird the whole time. I set up a cam, just one, angled low to catch motion. It was tripped 3 times that night. Once by a fox, once by the bear again, and once at 3:11 a.m. That last one didn't show an animal. Just a dark shape moving upright behind the trees. Too tall, too thin. Looked like it was facing the wrong direction, like its back should have been to the camera, but the silhouette was reversed. I checked the lens. No glare or malfunction. I didn't report it, I just swapped the card and tried not to overthink it. A week later, we got a ping from a caller that we'd lost the season before. It was the first bobcat, the original one. The caller had stopped transmitting after a snowstorm, and we'd assumed battery failure. But now it was moving again. Same pattern, same 10-minute pause in that clearing. I pulled the movement data, and the timestamps showed something that I didn't want to believe. All of the animals, everyone that had stopped in that clearing, had returned to it again. Same night, same time, 3:11 a.m. I went back just one last time. It was mid-May by then. Green canopy overhead, thick brush coming in. I told myself that I was just checking the site, taking notes for future exclusion zones. But as I got close, I heard something that I hadn't heard in weeks out there. A voice. Hello? Just once. Spoken softly from somewhere behind the tree line. It was just a conversational tone, but loud enough so that I could hear it, like someone reminding me they were there. The part that still sticks with me, though, is the tone. Hello? It was just so natural, no distress. But there was certainly no one there. That was the last time those callers did that, though. I tell myself that it was just a glitch, just data. But I can't really explain that voice. And I can't really explain what those animals were doing. That's sort of a first for me. Not sure if this is the kind of story you're looking for in this sub, but it's one that stuck with me, so here goes. I used to work in low-income home weatherization, basically helping people reduce their utility bills by sealing up their homes and adding insulation, new doors, that kind of thing. It was government-funded and honestly felt like meaningful work most days, especially in winter. Part of the job was inspecting combustion appliances, furnaces, water heaters, to make sure that they weren't leaking carbon monoxide. Seal up a house too tight around a bad appliance and, well, you could kill someone, whole families even. So it was important. One day, I get sent out to do a pre-inspection, a house way off the grid, deep woods, outside the city by a good hour. Out there, the GPS stops working and the road turns to gravel long before you see the place. It was quiet, surrounded by thick trees, isolated. I meet the homeowner, go through the usual intro and ask where the water heater is. In the basement, he says. Pretty standard. Then he starts moving the fridge, Turns out the basement entry was under a flap of worn-out carpet, directly beneath the refrigerator. Which, yeah, in all of the thousands of homes I've visited, I'd never seen anything like that. He lifts the flap, pulls open this thin wood door, and there it is, a narrow staircase into total darkness. I kneel down and shine my flashlight, mostly checking for black widows. Those things love undisturbed basements, and I hate them. Light catches on something at the bottom of the stairs. It's something. Bones now. Some sort of small animal. Unpleasant, sure, but not totally abnormal. I step down a few creaky steps and start scanning, and then I spot another skeleton. Smaller. Maybe a rat. And then another, and another. Some of them are picked nearly clean. Others are in that half-mummified state. At least 10, just on a quick look around. And then I notice the guy. He's still up there, standing by the door, watching, quiet. I can see he's got one hand resting on the edge of the entrance, just holding it. Something clicks, not a loud realization, more like a quiet voice in my head. Something saying this isn't right. The entrance was hidden. The space reeks of old death. And suddenly I'm very aware that I'm alone. I'm 5 steps into a basement that no one knows I'm in. No cell signal, no partner, no neighbor for miles. I backed out fast. I told him I needed another tool for my truck, that I'd be right back. I wasn't. I marked the place as non-feasible due to health and safety concerns, and I drove straight back to the office. Never went back out there. To this day, I have no idea if I was ever actually in any real danger. Maybe it all was just bad luck and poor upkeep. But sometimes, you just don't take the chance. This happened when I was around 10, during one of those weird in-between summers where everything felt like it was just on the edge of changing. And it was. My cousin and I were at a summer camp near Rainy Lake in northern Minnesota. Camp Coaching. Big pine trees, dark water, docks that creak even when there's no wind. It wasn't your typical s'mores and crafts kind of camp. It felt more like a wilderness outpost that the forest hadn't quite given permission to exist. We were there for a youth soccer training week, kind of a mix between workouts and wilderness survival. A lot of running, a lot of swimming, and way too much bug spray. It was our last day there. Most of the gear was packed, and parents were due to pick us up in a couple of hours. Me, my cousin Ryan, and his older brother Matt decided to walk off some of our leftover energy. There's a towpath trail that follows this old canal just beyond the cabins, mostly used by maintenance staff and the odd canoe group. It's not the kind of spot that the counselors wanted kids wandering off alone to, but we weren't really the listening type. The trail was quiet. We were laughing about something stupid, probably arguing over whether a bear could really outrun a mountain lion, when Ryan stopped cold. "Hey," he pointed. "Check that out." There was a jacket floating in the water. Looked almost brand new. Dark blue with orange trim. You would be wearing this jacket if it was colder. It didn't make sense, seeing it drifting like that. No other debris, no ripples. No obvious reason that it would be there. Ryan's always been the type to grab shiny things off the ground, half magpie, half raccoon, so of course he stepped down toward the edge to pull it out. He reached for a stick, hooked it through the arm, and gave it a tug. The jacket rolled, and so did the body wearing it. We saw the face, or rather, where the face should have been. It was gone, like the water had taken it. No eyes, no nose. Just barely any skin stretched over bone. One side looked bloated, the other eaten away, like something had been working on it for a while. It didn't even look like a person anymore. More like something made. None of us said a word, not even Ryan. We just stared. I remember the way that one of the sleeves dragged behind in the water like it was reaching for something. I remember the way the air suddenly smelled like rust and wet leaves. And I remember the stillness. There was a stillness that didn't feel natural. Like everything had stopped to watch. It was Matt who snapped out of it first. He grabbed us by the shoulders, practically threw us back up the path, and didn't stop until we were halfway to the main road. We told the first adult we saw. Camp staff called the cops. I never found out what came of it. They told our parents that it was a drowning victim. Some guy who must have fallen off a boat, drifted down the canal. But here's the thing. We knew that water. We'd been swimming in it, canoeing in it, even fell in it once or twice. It wasn't deep enough to hide a body for long, and the canal didn't run that far. And no one ever explained the jacket. No missing person, no update, no name, just a quiet reminder not to go over near that part of the trail again. I think other than actually witnessing it, the worst part has been every now and then I'll dream about that moment. The still water, the jacket turning, and that hollow, faceless thing looking back, without eyes. I've been listening to this channel for a while now, and I hear lots of cryptid and ghost stories, but I was attacked by an actual tree. My parents live on the edge of a national forest, so I grew up playing in the woods. When I was 16, I went exploring and planned to camp out so that I could go farther than my usual places. Friday night was fine, and I was in new territory by Saturday afternoon. After a couple of miles, I tripped over a thin vine stretching across my trail. It was pulled tight, like someone put it there on purpose. But when I checked, both ends were planted. This thing came out of the ground on one side, grew straight across the path, and went back into the ground on the opposite side. It wasn't like blackberries, though. I'd never seen anything like it. There was a big tree a few feet away, one that's good for sitting under, so I figured it was a good time to stop for a sandwich. All I did was sit down, lean against the tree, and eat my sandwich. I was there for maybe 10 minutes. When I tried to stand, there were vines wrapped around both of my shoes and all the way up past my ankle. I pulled one off, and then when I pulled at the other, it started getting tighter. I had to use a knife to cut it. Once free, I leaned back against the tree and looked down at the ground, watching to see what would happen again. There's just no way vines can grow that fast. After several minutes, nothing happened. I decided that I must be crazy and was getting ready to move on. But when I pushed off against the tree, I fell right back against it. There was a whole new vine around my neck. It wasn't tight yet, but it had wrapped all the way around from the tree, and it was hanging loose on me like a necklace. It's like the tree was trying to keep me there. This one was too thick to break. It was also covered in thorns, unlike the others, so I had to cut it too. A dark green liquid oozed out, some kind of plant blood. It was thinner than sap, but thicker than water. Honestly, I was super freaked out. I quickly backed away from the tree, but I tripped on another vine, fell on my ass. Before I could get up, even more thorny vines were tangling, some close to my wrist and legs. I watched them come out from the ground. in a way that I've never seen any sort of plant move or grow. Not possible. Yet here I was. Every place that it had touched me, the green ooze, it burned like fire, especially when it got into the cuts from the thorns. Before I'd even managed to get to my feet, I saw even more coming out from under the ground. Once on my feet, I ran a far enough distance to be free of their range. When I finally seemed to be safe, I realized my stuff was still under that tree, but I was way too scared to go back for it. I ended up leaving everything behind, including my sleeping bag, and I started back towards home. That was more than enough exploring for me. That night was rough. My parents were pissed when I came back without my gear. I knew they wouldn't believe what happened, so I just told them I lost it all. I was forbidden from staying out overnight after that, but I didn't complain. I never went very far into those woods again after that. I don't know if that place was haunted, cursed, or if that's some sort of normal kind of tree I don't know about. But I've never heard of this happening to anyone else before. It's been over 20 years since that day, and I haven't experienced anything like it since. So I'm pretty sure that I'm not crazy. It's completely unexplainable, though. I don't usually post here. I read stuff sometimes late at night when I can't sleep, but I've never felt like I had something worth sharing. Until last week. I work as part of a road maintenance crew based out of Hope, British Columbia. For the past couple of years, I've been doing contract work up around the Coquihalla, mostly patching up remote access roads for forestry and survey teams. Long hours, not a lot of people around, and plenty of dead zones for a phone signal. Anyway, last Thursday we were set up north of Yale. Real backcountry stuff. Gravel road that barely shows up on the map. We were supposed to clear a section after a minor rock slide. Just me, another guy from the crew, and our supervisor in the truck. The weirdness started when we got to the site. There were these footprints in the mud at the edge of the slide. Not tire tracks, but footprints. But huge. Like easily twice the size of my boot. And deep. Whatever made them was heavy. But there were only 3 of them. No full path or clear direction, just 3 prints, like something just took a few steps and disappeared. We joked that it was Sasquatch territory and kept moving, but I took a picture on my phone. I sent it to my brother later. He thought it was photoshopped. After we wrapped up for the day, the supervisor left to check another site. Me and the other guy, Rob, we stayed behind to finish stacking the equipment. Just the 2 of us. Real quiet out there. Barely any wind. You could hear everything. And we did. A thump. Low and heavy. Like a log falling, but more deliberate. Not a tree falling or a rock slide, just one solid thud. Rob looked at me and said, "Did you hear that?" We both stood there listening. Another minute passed. Then we heard it again. Thump. And again, but farther off. It didn't sound close, but it felt big. Like you could feel it in your chest. The part that still messes with me. We never heard birds again after that. Not a single one. Just silence and those distant low thuds. Maybe 3 or 4 total, but nothing. We packed up fast after that. I thought that maybe it was a blasting somewhere nearby, but no one had permits for anything in the area. I checked later. No reports. That night, while I was looking at the footprint photo again, I noticed something I hadn't before. Up on the ridge, way in the back of the frame, There's a line of trees, and in between two of them, just barely visible, is a dark shape. Could be a rock, could be a shadow, but it was huge, like those footprints. I've worked in these woods for years. I know bear prints, moose, cougar, you name it. Never seen anything remotely like those before, or since. Do any other 90s Nevada kids have a memory of a school assembly with a guy coming in to talk about drinking and driving? He was in an electric wheelchair, dyed his hair blue. He may have only been hired in Clark County, but this couldn't have been isolated to just my elementary school. I have no clue what his name was, but yeah, tell me if you remember this. And if you don't, just keep in mind that I wasn't even 10 yet. And this guy starts his story by telling us that he and his girl had just scored a bag of angel dust after a night of heavy drinking. Guy had a Pontiac Firebird, brand new. He used to be a business guy, someone making a lot of money in a high-up position, probably like a Wolf on Wall Street kind of guy. He's cruising, going way above the speed limit, and thinks that he sees an animal on the road. He swerves, slams into a telephone pole. Girl goes out the windshield, like a torpedo. His words, not mine. But he was wearing his seatbelt. He didn't remember putting it on. Said Jesus clicked it for him. Jesus must have forgotten about his passenger. He didn't say that, and I didn't ask. But I did ask my teacher why Jesus didn't click his girlfriend's seatbelt too, and the teacher laughed, but had no answer for me. All right, guy hits the pole, girlfriend flies away, dies. He sees her go, unbuckles his Jesus belt, gets out to go find her. His arm and shoulder are broken from the airbag, but he can't feel anything because he's still jazzing on the multitude of substances he consumed earlier. The telephone pole almost completely split the car in half, like he could have stepped out the open side on his right, but instead exited out the car door to look for his girlfriend. At the end, he trips and lands on the live wires of the telephone pole and electrocutes himself, to the extent of needing his left arm and both legs amputated. His shtick was to use the good arm to pull out a trucker hat from behind his back. Across the front of the hat, in large graffiti-looking font, it said, "Handy." Then he puts it on his head and proudly screams, "This is my only handicap," while pointing at it, almost challenging us to say anything otherwise. It was an uncomfortable joke, and a lot of us didn't know whether to laugh or continue to feel bad for the man. We were definitely too young for his story. And that's why I'm wondering if anyone else that didn't go to Hickory Ridge recalled this guy, because he got really off track. Started telling some wild story that happened right before he fell on the wires. Like, took the assembly from its scheduled 30 minutes to over an hour. Our recess bell rang, but the teacher didn't let us leave. I'm gonna call this guy Sam. Sam gets to the part where he realizes his girlfriend's been ejected through the windshield. A girl a few rows in front of me raises her hand. She asks, "Where'd she go?" Sam says something along the lines of, "I don't know if I can get into all of that." But what big room full of children wouldn't all start coaxing him to get into all of whatever that was? He looked in the direction of our principal, who had only been paying attention enough to give a thumbs up before returning to her conversation with another teacher. Sam says, "All right." He sits up in his chair and leans forward the best he could. The happy, high-pitched, almost annoying voice that he was using switched to low and serious. Then he starts by asking if anyone knows about the abandoned mine shaft down on Oldman Highway, southern tip of the state. After a brief silence, he says, "Well, a family of Bigfoot lives in that cave, and they despise me, because almost a year before that accident, I was driving down that same road, and one of their young'uns was on the shoulder. I didn't see it when I rounded the corner. That thing broke my windshield. In his rearview mirror, he saw who he presumed to be the young'un's much bigger dad, chasing after the car. After that, he said he did his best to stay out of that area because they could smell his scent, and every time he drove through after that, he'd always eventually see the Bigfoot stalking him, hiding behind the trees or big rocks. It would always make sure that he knew, that they knew he was there. On the night of the accident he came to talk about, he didn't want to go down there, but the only dealer that would answer his calls was a guy in Golden Shores, and the fastest road from point A to B was Oltman Highway. Being an addict, he chose the quicker route, rather than the safer trip, which added an extra half hour. Then, Sam says, remember the animal in the road, the one that I swerved into the telephone pole for. That's only true on police paperwork. What really happened is I got ambushed by the Bigfoot. He chose that night to seek his revenge on me. He says the Bigfoot gave him one too many chances to stay away, and when he caught up to the Firebird that Sam was driving, the Bigfoot came from the side and shoulder rammed the side of the car, sending it into the telephone pole. He points to the kid who had the original question and goes, "You asked where the girl went, right?" Their nervous head nods yes, and Sam says, "Yeah, well, she went far away. Not anywhere close to the car. And that's why you should always wear your seatbelt." He tells us that he went looking for her, calling her name while slowly making his way down the little embankment off the side of the highway. It was the middle of the night and pretty much impossible to get a good view of anything, and the grass where he thinks she landed was tall and overgrown. He starts to tiptoe, stepping around while kicking through the grass, hoping he'll make contact with her. The pain in his broken bones slowly begin to throb with the rhythm of his heartbeat. At the bottom of the hill, the V-shaped ground rises up to an almost vertical rock wall that leads to a plateau. Somehow after the crash, one of the car's headlights is still working, has a little bit of the rocky incline in its light. Sam heard small rocks falling down the wall. He looked up, saw his girlfriend on the edge of the dim light. From his point of view, it looked like she was hovering above him on her back. Her arms and legs hung limp, her head tilted back. Her blonde hair and dress fluttered beneath in the wind, but her back was curved like she was pushing out with her chest. She hung like that, above his head, before her body floated out of the light. Sam stepped back and watched her continue to levitate upward. Now only brightened with what the moon could provide, she was a little more than a silhouette, hidden in the rock's reflections. Sam stops and asks us if we know why cats' eyes glow red in the dark. In a surprising turn of events, and out of his whole presentation, he tells us a fact that I've been able to remember ever since he told us. There's a reflective layer in their eyes called the tapetum lucidum. It acts like a mirror, reflecting light back through the retina, which boosts the amount of light available for the cat to see in low light conditions. He says cats have them, owls have them, but other creatures have them too. They can see you a lot better in the dark than you can see them. He says that he backed up more, and he saw two big red eyes hovering just above the girl's chest. What Sam mistook as floating was her body being dragged up an almost 90-degree rock wall. He thought that he was looking at a mountain lion pulling her up by her shirt and its teeth, but when it fully made its way to the top of the plateau, it stood up on two legs, and Sam could see that it was the Bigfoot. With the girl still firmly in between its snarling teeth, it stared down at Sam. His injuries were becoming increasingly more and more painful as he described the situation sobering him up. No matter what, his only option was going to be walking miles to the nearest gas station for help. But Sam's too afraid to move as he stared back up at the menacing giant. Another realization sends a jolt of distress through his body, more than the broken bones. Looking up at that Bigfoot, he doesn't think it's the same one that pushed the car off the road. He becomes paranoid that there's a second Bigfoot coming for him, and that's why the first one hadn't left yet. Sam said the moment when it all sank in was the most fear that he'd ever felt in his life. He admitted to urinating himself without even knowing it. Trapped at the bottom, the hill leading to the highway was more forgiving when it came to an incline, and he was able to crawl his way up using one arm. Thinking he was going to get grabbed from behind every agonizing inch he progressed, Sam was exhausted and woozy by the time he reached the top of the hill, back to where his car laid. Debris from it were littering the road in both directions. He looked, and the smell of oil and gas permeated the air. But there was no fire from the wreckage. The thought crossed his mind that if there was a fire, the possibilities of someone seeing it and discovering there'd been an accident and going to look for them would be sooner than not. He was hoping that it would make a big enough smoke cloud to reach over the hills. Maybe someone, anyone, would see it and go investigate. With his good arm, Sam digs in the pockets of his jeans. Every movement he makes sends a binding surge of pain through his body. And of course, what he was searching for had to be in the third of the 4 pockets that he had checked. And with a final exhale, a surge of electricity radiated in him as he retrieved the book of matches that he kept in his pockets for his smokes. Sam had also mentioned that the cigarettes in his pockets were completely destroyed. Not a single smoke survived, which was an additional bummer to the already horrible night he was experiencing. Getting down on one knee, Sam readied the match in his hand while balancing the book using his thigh like a table. He slid it across the rough grain, but it doesn't light. He throws it on the ground and has to repeat the process of pressing it against his thigh and trying to get the matchstick to pull with one hand. His struggle to tear the fire starter makes him unbalanced, and with an unlucky wobble to the left instead of the right, he landed on some live wires that had been taken down on the telephone pole. Sam actually taught us 2 random facts that I've been able to remember up to my adulthood, because he told us that he fell on the live wire, but instead of his muscles contracting, they propelled him like a frog, because it's not the electricity itself that makes a person jump. It's the way the electricity affects the body's muscles. He got as lucky as he could under the circumstances. He got shot backwards 3 to 4 yards, almost down the hill again. The next time he woke up, he was in a hospital, and all of his limbs were gone, except for the one that he was scratching his head with, wondering what happened. Throughout his recovery, police interrogated him about the missing passenger, but he was never convicted for that because they couldn't gather enough evidence or something like that. He breezed past that last part pretty quickly, trying to end the story, as our assembly had gone way over time. Well, friends, it appears we've reached the end of tonight's episode. Thanks for joining me. Whether it's your first time or you're a regular, your support means the world over here. We've got brand new episodes every Friday night. Keep those eyes open for those deep sleep videos. And of course, subscribe, tap the bell, and you'll never miss a thing. Special thanks to the Darkest Hour channel members: Lori TESDAHL, Sarah Marie, Robert Bailey, T. COLTDADDY Eagle, Mallory Dominguez, Kari Watkins, PILAR TREDEN WIXSON, Larry Hill, Ripley, JOJO STARCHER, Mary Patrick, Debbie LAFRENIERE, Julie Bourdelais, Jennifer Beck, Marina LACHNER, Make Hamilton Home, Evan Pratt, Mary Hineline, Katharine Yes.ImtherealKatie Isabelle, Land Shark, Danielle Hecht, Veronica Mckiernan, Keziah Pietersen, Amber Baker, Khris Lauzon, Kara Geos, Marvin Allen, ForgottenruinsTV, and Raven Wolf. Big thanks to those who shared their stories, and a huge shout out to all of our patrons: Tracy S., Mary H., Tanya F., Tamara K., Monica L., Zoe Watt, Shelley B., Donald C., Marion T., Rat Girl, Alicia S., Aaron G., Nikki H., Mr. Revenant, Naz K., Brendan G., Paul T., Nicholas C., Tony P., Lizanne, Arlene F., Adrian, T.F. Parham, Jason G., Lori T., and Bobo Jenkins. If you want to support The Darkest Hour in other ways, consider joining our Patreon. Check out patreon.com/thedarkesthour, or click the link in the description to learn more. Do you have stories like these? I'd love to share them. Send them to me, Amanda, darkesthour@gmail.com, or on the Darkest Hour subreddit, The Darkest Hour YT. Stay spooky.